Hi everyone, my name is Dana Hachamdan. I work with Hewitt Zollers as a structural bridge engineer, and I'm serving as this year's co-chair for programs with Elaine Jin, who also works at HC. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Paul Cristina serves as the CEO for the Denton County Transportation Authority, where he is responsible for delivering the services of DCTA's integrated multimodal transportation portfolio to the citizens of the agency members, cities Denton, Highland Village, and Louisville. The agency provides the A-Train commuter rail service, GO Zone, a micro-transit service ranked among the top 25 in the country for ridership, and bus service to the city of Denton and UNT, the fourth largest university in Texas. The agency delivered nearly 3 million transit rides in 2025 across Denton County, one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. Mr. Cristina joined DCTA as Deputy Chief Executive Officer in November of 21, after serving as the Director of Public Projects and System Designs at the NSF Railway. After serving as DCTA's interim CEO, he was officially named CEO in September of 22. A registered professional engineer, Paul began his career at the United States Air Force as a civil engineer officer, holding positions of increasing responsibility within the base civil engineer squadrons at Tyndall Air Force Base, Grand Forks Air Force Base, and in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Mr. Cristina received his bachelor degrees in civil engineering from the United States Air Force Academy and an MBA from Florida State University. Please help me welcome Paul to the book.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be with you. I'm super excited. I don't get to talk to engineers very often, and so when I do, we can speak. You know, we don't have to translate things. We understand each other. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today, and I also want to recognize Mr. Randy Evans in the back from our marketing communications department, who helped me put together this presentation. Many friends and associates in the room, including Ms. Nancy Klein, who represents her citizens of the city of Carrollton, and we're working closely with them on the A-Train extension, which we'll talk about here in a second. Before I get into this, I want to reflect just a little bit. I'm 25 years post-bachelor's degree, and some of these young folks that sit up, that you're entering into this career of civil engineering. And I did it because I wanted to participate in things that made our society better. And that really is what you get to do. You get to help build infrastructure that causes civilized society to function. And sometimes the only times you're recognized is when it doesn't function. And you just got to be okay with that. Like, nobody says, thank you that the parking lot drains, or thank you that my toilet flushed. But if those things don't happen, then you're going to get to hear about it. So just know you're in a service business, and I wish you all the best. The things that you're going to learn, though, give you a manner of thinking and seeing the world that can make you be successful in a lot of different realms. At no point in my undergrad degree did I think I was going to work in public transportation one day. But when I got to know people like Mr. Jim Klein, who ran DCTA before I did, and bachelor's of civil engineering, Mr. Gary Thomas, bachelor's of civil engineering, it was relationships like those that caused me to say, maybe I've got some skills that allow me to do things beyond just putting my name and stamp on the piece of paper. And so I want to commend you for the career you've chosen, for those already in it, for the career you're in, and just hope that what I can offer today is helpful to some extent. What I'd like to do is help you understand what's happening in the public transportation space in DFW. Lots of conversation about DART in the last year. I want to talk about how DCTA navigated similar circumstances like that, and then also talk about some of our major projects, including the A-Train Enhancement Program. So first, I want to acknowledge our board of directors. They provide all of the support, fiduciary and otherwise, that we need in order to do our job. And this is the board of directors here. 5 members, 2 representatives from Denton County, including County Judge Andy Eads, who serves currently as our board chair, and Mr. Cesar Molina, another at-large Denton County representative. And then our 3-member cities, Denton, Highland Village, and Louisville, each represented by single members. Mayor Gilmore representing Louisville as our vice chair, Dan Jaworski, recently elected back to Highland Village City Council, and Susie Rumor, who's deputy mayor pro tem there in the city of Denton. Next slide, please. So DCTA as an agency is funded primarily by a half-cent sales tax provided by our 3 member cities of Denton, Highland Village, and Louisville. That's about 80% of our overall operating budget. The rest of it comes from federal grants, passenger revenues, those sorts of things. That's my first takeaway is in public transportation in Texas, you have to pay attention to the people who pay the bills. The people who pay the bills demand results. And so what you're going to see in my presentation is a lot of data about ridership and impacts and all that sort of stuff. And I would put forward that will continue to be more and more important in the transit conversation moving forward in the coming years. As a part of our service portfolio, A-Train, GoZone. Anybody familiar with what microtransit is, or you're not familiar with what microtransit is? Okay, it's basically like Uber, but for public transportation. So if you download the GoZone app from the App Store right now, and you're in the member cities, you can open up that app and you say it knows where you are, it knows where you want to go, and it can get you there for $1.50 a ride. Uber, but for public transportation. We also see our access service for elderly and disabled folks, as well as van pool. And those are two of the fastest growing services we have. And I'll talk about that here in a second. Next slide, please. So the first thing that happened when I took on the role of interim CEO at DCTA was to re-collaborate on what is it that we do and why do we exist. See, in the mid-teens, the DCTA conversation with the board of directors and a lot of the member cities sounded a lot like what was happening at DART in the last year. Hey, we're not really satisfied with the services that we get. We don't think fixed route buses are right for our suburban context. What can we be doing differently? And so when the board got reset, we made it very simple. What do? We get people where they need and want to go for work, play, and life. And that need and want to go is really important there. Need because many of the people we serve don't have any options but for public transportation, but want to go means that some of the people we serve do have options. Some of the communities that we serve, household incomes are very healthy, multiple cars in the driveway. And so that creates a higher standard for us in our offerings. From a vision perspective, we're about innovation, we're about economic development, we're about community engagement, we're about sustainable transportation. And it's really important that we measure the impact that we deliver. And we do that primarily by looking at our safety, service, and ridership. Next slide. So safety is the most important thing we do, because if somebody doesn't get home from our system same way they came to our system, then we didn't do our job. Service, we measure on-time performance, seat availability, those sorts of things. I'm going to talk about ridership. What you see here is a graph from 2011 when the A-Train came online through 2025 of historic ridership at the agency. And what you see is a consistent service delivery of about 3 million trips per year. And then something happened in 2021. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it made a lot of impact negatively on the transit system. But then what makes DCTA different is the rebound. If you're a hockey fan, this is what they call a hockey stick recovery. You like to see it in your financial portfolio. We love to see it in our ridership portfolio. And the reason that happened was because after the board said, hey, we think we can do better, and they reconstituted themselves and refocused ourselves, that's when we launched the GoZone service. It delivers 850,000 trips a year. Oh, can we go back? Sorry. It delivers about 850,000 trips a year, and it's about a third of our ridership. And that's what allowed us to recover, because it works better than buses in the suburban context, which is what most of our cities have. The graphs in the table in the upper right, I'll talk about just a second. Inside that 3 million trips, what you see in the 2021 to 2024 timeframe is recovery and transformation. And now I'm saying that we're in a period of optimization where our service mix is changing, and we're driving efficiency to understand how we deliver the most rides we can for the most cost-effective way possible. And so one of the things that's emerging is that one of the major ridership generators for us is our University of North Texas shuttle service. We operate that under contract with the university, and their enrollment has been hit very hard in the last few years for a lot of reasons, but that drives our ridership in the wrong direction. And so if you look at ridership overall, so far this year, we're down 3%. That's not a great news story. But if you look at the non-UNT service total, this is what we're providing to our core member cities, we're up 7%. And so that's one of the things that tells us we're making investment in the right place, which I'll talk about here in a second. In the bottom right, I would just highlight that access for our elderly and disabled folks is, for the last 5 years, double-digit ridership growth. As people live longer, they require and demand independence for more length of time, and we provide that service. And on the van pool side, you see that it's steadily been 5 to 7% ridership growth, but this year 30% ridership growth, 39% ridership growth. The folks that we partner with for the van pool program has seen that the North Texas environment is something they want to double down on. And so as fast as we can put the vans on the street, they're being consumed. Trips as far away as southern Oklahoma making their way into the DFW Metroplex for people that work at some of the manufacturing facilities around here. It's pretty astounding. Next slide. You can skip this. So I want to talk about how DCTA navigated this period where we had dissatisfied member cities who wanted more for their public transit dollar. This table is showing you all of the routes that were available in the city of Denton right before that service transition was made. And there was this idea floating around that a productive bus route moved 10 passengers per hour. And for simplicity of math, let's say that bus cost $100 an hour to deliver. Well, we had this microtransit product that cost about $50 an hour, and we knew that the van moved 4 passengers per hour at $50 an hour. So 50 divided by 4, $12.50 per passenger. So the bus can only get to $12.50 a passenger if there's a lot more than 8 people on the bus, because it's $100 an hour. So the first thing the board did was said, we're going to cut any route that's not meeting a minimum rider threshold of about 4 passengers per hour, because there's some advantage to the bus of being continuously available throughout the time period. And so that's what we did. So the city of Denton went from the 6 routes that you see there, not to the 4 that are still highlighted, but to 3 that remain that were meeting that threshold throughout the service day. Next slide. So then after about a year, what we saw was the GoZone service was operating in the same area as the bus network. And when somebody uses GoZone, just like when they use Uber or Lyft or any other thing on their phone, we can see exactly when you call for the ride, time of day, day of week, and where you're going and where you're coming from and where you're going to. And so all those green dots of the map are GoZone rides that were starting and ending within a quarter mile of our existing fixed route bus system. And so we had this idea that what if we ran the bus more frequently, because some of those buses were running on 20-minute frequencies, some on 45-minute frequencies. They started and ended at different times. We said, what if we ran the bus continuously from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday on a 20-minute frequency? Could we cause the technology on the GoZone app to take those trips and cause those people to go to the bus? And so that's what we did. So next slide. So what would happen is, you call for the ride, you're within a quarter mile of one of those stops, you're trying to go within a quarter mile of one of those stops, and the bus and the app would say, hey, thank you for your request, go and take the bus. And it worked really well. So this is the math behind that decision point that got a little more sophisticated after the first, and I see people nodding. I never see people nodding their heads up and down when I show this slide. So I'm so excited for this, so excited. So this is a cost curve where we're comparing the cost per passenger between GoZone and the bus. And so on the vertical axis, or I could even say in this room, in the y-axis, you've got cost per passenger. And on the x-axis, you've got number of passengers on the network. And so the orange line is the cost curve for GoZone, because like I said, every 5th passenger, you've got to add another bus to the network. And so that cost never goes below about $12 a ride. But on the bus, that's the blue line that you see. And depending on how many buses you have on the network and how many people you have riding, the bus cost per passenger can go down almost, asymptotically, another word I could never say anywhere else, to 0. So where that bus line and the GoZone line cross, that's the point of indifference, where if you're moving people to the right of that point, it's more effective to use the bus. If you're moving the number of people to the left of that point, it's more effective to use the GoZone service. And when we made this decision, we saw that in the early morning, it wasn't really cost effective to use the bus, but in the afternoon it was. But we know that on a network, you can't put the bus online for part of the day and take the bus off. And so the board made the investment. They made a wager. If we invest in this bus service, we think ridership is going to increase at least 10% and make the bus more cost effective. And the result was it worked better than we expected. Next slide. So 10% so the buses in Denton run 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, 20-minute frequencies. We take 10% of the GoZone capacity out of Denton. We move it to Louisville and Highland Village because they have no fixed route bus service. And what we see is Go Zone ridership in Denton goes down 10%, exactly what we expected. Bus ridership in Denton went up, not 10%, but 58%, because we captured all the Go Zone riders, and then we captured other people who weren't using transit before because the bus was always there. And so that proves this adage that lives in the transit industry that, if you run the bus frequently and safely, people will use it. Yes, and this data shows it. And in Texas, the data matters. And so people listen to it more when you can share it. And then on the Louisville and Highland Village side, we saw the ridership on Go Zone increase not 10%, but 12% and 22%, because they were getting better ride proposals, like the vans got there to them faster and the trips were shorter. And so they wanted to use transit even more. So for very minimal incremental investment, we were able to shift resources, not grow our operating budget very significantly, and deliver better outcomes for every one of our member cities. So it can be done. Next slide. So in phase 2 of what we called the intermediate service plan, we were able to set up geo-fenced areas around UNT, TWU, because where we were running fixed route resources around those campuses, we wanted the college students to take the fixed route. And so that further enhanced our service performance. And then the next slide. And we're going to try to do this again. So these two networks are showing you the same routes 3, 6, and 7, plus on the left-hand side, 2 additional routes that if we were to put those in service, 7 a.m., 9 p.m., Monday through Friday, we think we could capture 30% of all the Go Zone trips in Denton. And on the network on the right, by adding another route, the one that you see on the south, towards the south and east, that would capture 54% of all the Go Zone ridership in the city. And so we've teed this conversation up for our board. They're poised to make the decision. The trick with the option on the right is that the University of North Texas, that shuttle program that we operate under contract, they participate financially in that route. And so we want them to participate with us financially if it's going to continue. And so we're working with them through that conversation before making that decision. Next slide. So I talked about the ridership increases for each of the member cities. In Louisville, where they just, before all of this change in the 2019 timeframe, their last year just running fixed route, they got 122,000 transit trips out of DCTA. Last year, they got 268,000 transit trips out of DCTA on microtransit, and they're probably going to hit 280 by this year. So context matters. The tool in the toolbox matters. Transit is not a bus. Transit is not a train. Transit is an infrastructure that has to fit the circumstances that it's trying to serve, and this data proves it. Next slide. On the Highland Village side, the same thing is true. Now, when I talked about that modal, the service provider of choice, because people have options, Highland Village is a community of 15,000 people, median household income, probably 150,000 a year, multiple cars in the driveway, at least one of them is an import probably. And what you can see in this data, though, is that they're getting 1,000 trips a month. They're getting excellent service. And because they're connected to the city of Louisville, look at where those green dots in Louisville connects to blue dots there in Highland Village. That is showing you people who are going from Louisville into Highland Village for some purpose, work, play, otherwise. Where those dots are clustered are all along the FM 407 corridor. And if you're familiar with this area, you know that FM 407 is where all the shopping is. It's where all the restaurants are. So those are people going from Louisville to Highland Village to shop or to work. I have a picture on my LinkedIn profile or LinkedIn page of a Go Zone van in front of Whole Foods. Okay. Public transportation can serve a lot of different needs. It can serve a lot of different uses. We just have to apply it correctly. And so we're really proud of those kinds of outcomes. Next slide. So, and in Denton, what we have now is from 2022 to 2026, we're on pace for 4 consecutive years of fixed route ridership growth. So bus service ridership growth is not something that we're hearing a lot in the transit industry at large, but in DFW in particular. But these modal investments that we've made, data-driven, have given us significant results. And if you look at our cost per passenger at DCTA, we're at about $4.67 a passenger versus our peers that are at $10.77, almost $11 a passenger. So we feel really good about that as well. Next slide. So I want to transition. That's the conversation about what DCTA has been up to in the last 4 years and how we're navigating this unique time in the transit industry. I want to talk about what we're doing to meet the needs of the future. The first, like was on the program, our A-Train enhancement program. really, we started this effort when I first got to DCTA. The board said the train has to be better. People have to find a reason to ride it. It's got to get them where they want to go. It's got to be integrated in the communities that we serve. And so that generated the A-Train Enhancement Program vision. And we said we're going to get to downtown Carrollton because the Silver Line can then get you to a 2-seat commuter rail ride to DFW Airport for a $9, what is today a $9 regional pass. That beats the heck out of paying to get into the gate at the airport and then paying $20 a day or whatever it is to park in remote, or at $40 a day at the terminal. We want to make the train go faster on its current alignment. We want to give it a 15-minute frequency because frequency matters, like the bus service showed us. And at 15-minute schedule, you don't care what the schedule says. When you show up at the platform, before you break a sweat, the train's going to be there to get you to where you want to go. And then we're also talking about station at the city of Corinth, who is situated right along the train tracks, is building a great transit-oriented development, but it doesn't have a transit interface to the A-Train. Next slide. So this diagram is showing you on the downtown Denton Transit Center on the 4 North. We connect today to Trinity Mills, interface with the Green Line. And if you want to do this move today, you've got to go A-Train to Green Line to Silver Line. That transfer takes you 45 minutes. The trip from DFW Airport to Highland Village today is 90 minutes. So this schedule means we cut the travel time in half. And for people who want to use transportation, they want to use it if it can get them there about as fast as the car can. And I would argue that by the time you get to DFW, especially if it's a peak, you find a place to park, you walk from the hinterlands into the terminal and all that sort of stuff, a 45-minute transit trip is very, very competitive. That's the vision here. Next slide. So trains are expensive. That's my takeaway for you today. I don't know if that's a continuing education credit you can get for that, but trains are expensive. $122 million is the current program estimate on this project. And what you see here is we've applied for a build grant. We've gotten some money committed to us from the region, and we're still short about $26 million or something like that. So we're having conversations with the board right now about what this project financing look like, those sorts of things. The project's going to get done. It's just going to be a matter of what's the funding mix to make it happen. One of the things that's emerged for me personally as I've been navigating this project and this whole regional transit conversation is we really have, as a region in DFW, only 15 cities funding the operation of what really is a regional asset in our commuter rail network. Between the A-Train, Text Rail, Silver Line, TRE, those are regional assets that are being borne on the backs of just a small number of cities that I would argue benefit where a lot of cities benefit from those. And someone might say, well, I'll never use the train. Well, what I'm going to show you in a little while is that in 2050, when you're stuck in traffic for an hour going from Denton to Louisville, you're going to wish the person next to you had an option. And so it really is incumbent upon all of us to figure out how to make this happen. Next slide. So one of the other things that we can do to make the A-Train better serve the communities is weave it into the places where it operates. And we do that through transit-oriented development. So we're starting this effort at the Old Town Louisville station, and I would give you a plug for Old Town Louisville. If you haven't been there in the last 10 years, even 5 years, take a Saturday and go out there. This city has done a tremendous job of having a long-term vision for what it wants its downtown to be, and they've really made it happen. This TOD provides 13 acres of developable space on the other side of the railroad tracks to bring that momentum to the east side of town. Immediately to the east of this parcel, the city has a deal going right now, and apartments and multifamily coming out of the ground with a developer who's building about 650 units. In our vision, we're trying to build a headquarters for the Denton County Transportation Authority. That's the big building with the tower on top of it. Think iconic railroad featured themed building, but then also regional destination draws like hotel conference center, retail, mixed use, restaurants, places that people want to be, because the A-Train was built in order to get people to and from work in Dallas out from the suburbs, and that's not the pattern anymore. And so we have the opportunity to introduce new people to transit by creating places along the railroad. Next slide. So let's talk about that emerging regional transit vision and how we're thinking about this. So a lot of what I'm going to show you is courtesy of the Council of Governments. Can't say enough about Michael Morris and his staff and the work they're doing to cause us as a region to think 25 years into the future. The map on the left is showing you population growth change across the 13 county area. The darker the blue, the more people that are moving into those areas. And the orange areas are the places that are currently served by public transportation. Do you see how the two don't line up? That's a big problem. The big problem is the map shown in the map on the right, and the darker the red, the more congestion on the highways that comes from it. And so think about people continuing to push farther and farther out, and the highways that they're relying on when they buy the house that's going to get them to their job in 30 minutes today. In the very near future, that capacity is going to be consumed and it won't do that anymore. Again, I see more heads nodding vigorously. This is very good. I'm very excited. Okay, next slide. So how does DCTA position ourselves to get into those areas where transit is not currently served? We think that the aging population is a real need that we can help meet because we know how to tailor solutions to the communities that we serve, like I talked about at the beginning of our presentation. 88% population growth in the 65 and older crowd, huge gap. And the communities today that are non-transit cities are saying, how do we meet this? The DCTA board passed a policy a year ago that said, we don't care about getting a dedicated sales tax from you as a new city. There aren't dedicated sales taxes to be had. But what we can do is sit down and understand what is the service that you want? How much does that service cost? And then how can we make a deal to provide that service that's mutually beneficial for your city and for DCTA so that we can begin to piece together a data-driven network like the one that I described at the beginning of the presentation. So next slide. So this is a map of what our service area looks like now. Denton, Highland Village, Louisville are our current member cities. And then we're providing these contracted services along the 121 corridor and then the city of Coppell. And imagine a future where every one of those cities on the 121 corridor are lit up with some kind of public transportation. And then imagine a future where we can know point to point where people are trying to get to and from. And then imagine a future where maybe there's some kind of high capacity conveyance on that 121 corridor. It's not going to happen during my career time, but that is kind of the vision that we're seeing, as Denton and Collin County are both top 5 fastest growing counties in the country. Next slide. So to that end, in Frisco, we just launched a Go Zone service. It operates inside of a subset of the Frisco city limits. You see a lot of the high interest points that we hit. And this is a long-term relationship. We're grateful for our partners at the city of Frisco, but we've been doing elderly and disabled transportation with them since 2015. It's continued to grow year after year. And so those conversations, relationships beget a broader service, which may beget a broader service in the future. Incrementally over time, steady progress in the right direction is what we're after. Next slide. Because what are we trying to build towards? So more data courtesy of the Council of Governments, and this is very much in development and an academic kind of discussion. But what you're seeing on the left is a map of travel time, or both are travel time maps. And red is better than purple, but the blue dot is the downtown Denton Transit Center. And this is telling us that a trip on I-35E from downtown Denton Transit Center to downtown Dallas in 2050 could take 120 minutes. That's excluding managed travel lanes, because obviously if you pay the managed travel times, you can go as fast as you want. But if we're thinking about equity and availability, not everybody's going to be able to afford that in the future, perhaps. On the right-hand side, you see transit travel times in 2050, and you see how downtown Denton Transit Center to the north of Carrollton area is just about 1 hour. That's where transit, so at some point in the future, transit becomes the guaranteed travel time that the highway is not able to keep up with, because on that roadway travel time map is included all the roadway projects that are in the 2050 plan. So it's not like we're assuming we stop building highways and then just build transit. And I'm not arguing for one mode versus the other. I'm arguing for an all of the above approach. And let's create a process by which we can engage as a region in having the conversation, what's the most cost-effective way to deploy our capital to enable guaranteed travel time, because that's what people are after. If we can if transit can speak the language of the economy and the highway community about guaranteed travel times, then we can talk about trade-offs between lane miles and transit performance. Next slide. Another thing that we could talk about that makes us more effective is economic access, because that's something that we do care about in Texas. The map on the left is showing you 2026, there's 271,000 jobs available within a 1-hour transit trip from downtown Denton Transit Center today. By 2050, if we build out all the projects that are in the 2050 plan, we have access to 883,000 jobs on a 1-hour transit trip. Now that's with transfers and things like that, but think back to some of those job locations and what the travel times were on the highway comparatively, and you begin to see what the transit value proposition looks like. And then the last slide. And then this is another one I know you'll love. This is showing you velocity on the y-axis, and on the x-axis year. And the green line is A-train ridership. That's on the far right y-axis. And the orange line is average speed on I-35 since 2011. And what you see is in the 2013 timeframe, congestion on I-35E started to really pick up. So velocity goes down, and look at what happens to the A-train ridership. It goes up. And then when you get to the point where the highway opened in 2017, velocity increases. And then what happened to the A-train ridership? It went down. I'm not a statistician, but it looks like there might be a correlation there. What's interesting is after COVID, the AM and PM peak travel times, you see how they've spread out. AM is pretty high because not everybody's going to work at the same time, but in the afternoon, everybody's coming home at the same time. And so that's why the PM travel time is lower. I would argue that as that velocity continues to decrease, you're going to continue to see A-train ridership increase. Again, data-driven conversations will help us be effective in the transit conversation. Next slide. So now as a region, what if we did that same type of exercise that I just went through, guaranteed travel time, job access, ridership versus velocity? What if we did that kind of analysis on the entire rail system in the whole Metroplex? What if we loaded every project in the 2050 plan into the matrix and said, what's the most cost-effective way for us to get the next level of service delivery on this corridor where we have a train and a highway? I'm not arguing train over highway. I'm arguing for let's have conversations about the most cost-effective way to deliver capital. Next slide. And then one of the other things we're working on, this is the last slide, as a region, we're having this conversation about how do we think about other sources of funding for public transportation? And the Transit 2.0 initiative that the COG wrapped up just about a year ago begot a subcommittee of the RTC, and they've tasked me and my counterparts at DART and Trinity Metro with figuring out what are the alternatives that we have. Well, how do we do that? Well, we know what it costs to run the regional rail system today. That's the brown box. And then we know what are the existing revenue sources that we have available to us in the region from a sales tax perspective, federal funding, other COG funds that are not necessarily oriented to transit as a guarantee. Well, if we subtract one from the other, then we're left with how much new funding do we need in order to meet the needs of the future? And this is the math that we're doing right now. So if you're interested in this conversation, stay tuned to the Transit 2.0 subcommittee and then the RTC and listen to the policy discussions that are starting to happen about how we realize this 2050 future, because mobility is what's enabled the Texas miracle to happen. It's been the cause of so many people moving here, including a lot of people in this room, me included. And so it's our job to make sure that that continues by figuring out how to engage transit as a tool in the toolbox for the future. And I think that is the last one. Okay, so thank you very much. My last plug is if you don't have the Transit app, the GoPass app, or the GoZone app on your phone, go to the App Store, download it. The Transit app will help you find public transportation without a schedule anywhere in the country that you go. You can open that thing up and it'll tell you what buses, what trains are running. It'll tell you what your travel time is from point A to point B. And the GoPass app does the same thing very, very well for the region. And if you're in the DCTA service area, come check us out. Thanks so much.